Good afternoon, and this afternoon I'm going to talk about a book I've written about a very sensitive topic. It's History's Black Rage, Anti-White Racism in the Age of Black Lives Matter. There it is. I felt moved to write it during the Black Lives Matter protests 3 years ago. As you will recall, Black Lives Matter was set up in America initially as a protest group against the disproportionate shooting of black people by the American cops, which was held to be because of endemic racism within the American police force. And then, after the murder of George Floyd, we saw the protests around the world, and it became a movement against the general oppression and discrimination against black people. Now, I have a problem with this in that I don't deny that black people do suffer from racism. I certainly don't deny that they have been, that oppression has taken place. For example, slavery, the Jim Crow laws in America, apartheid South Africa, and some very nasty attitudes, that were common in Britain until very recently. However, that's not the whole story, and there is another side, one which I think is is forgotten. And the problem I have, particularly with Black Lives Matter and the current wave of anti-racist protest, is that so much of it is based on critical race theory and postcolonial studies. Now, these are they're a postmodernist revision of Marxist doctrines. In critical race theory, the emphasis on class is rejected in favour of race, and it is held that white people are automatically privileged because of their white skin. It doesn't matter if they personally hate racism and they are not prejudiced against people of colour, they're privileged and they benefit from a racist system. It's also held that there hasn't been any progress. There is just as much racism now as there was 100 years ago. It's just better hidden. White people will always be racist, and black people will always be oppressed, unless they're taught otherwise. And that's where it gets nasty. Now, you can find some very unpleasant, and to my mind, quite racist videos on the net by people talking about critical race theory. There's one with a young black woman called Shaka Ford, I believe, explaining to a class of white people that that in her opinion they were not born into humanity. They cannot improve, and that they are devils to her. Now, that sounds to me like a very, very racist statement. However, whatever she meant by it, she probably believes she's tackling anti-racism. But that's it. Now, there is racism against whites in society, and these doctrines actually enabled this. Way back in the first years of this century, the number of whites killed in racist attacks was almost the same as those of people of colour in Britain. There was also a point where whites, I believe, formed the single largest group of victims of racist attacks and abuse. Again, This was covered by the newspapers and covered in the assault, and covered in the newspapers, and it was according to official statistics. This should not be controversial. I think the situation is probably different now, but these prejudices remain. I believe there was also an official report written by Yasmin Alabai Brown that concluded that there were some pockets of black and Asians culture which were viciously racist against whites. Now, these ideologies are just the latest in a series of religious and ideological movements intended to uplift blacks, but had an anti-white dimension to them. Some of these you can perfectly understand why, such as Black Islam and other similar black movements like Rastafarianism, the Black Hebrew Israelites, and so on, and the Ansar Allah community. These emerged in the early 20th century when blacks were oppressed. There was discrimination. There were the Jim Crow laws, and so on. Now, Black Islam was founded by Noble Drew Ali, who was very impressed with Egypt and the Egyptian monuments, and who claimed to have been initiated into a secret Egyptian religion. And it preached that black people were the chosen race. There would soon come a black messiah, and black people would be led off to either Egypt or Morocco. That was their promised land, away from white oppression. Now, the Moorish Science Temple produced the Nation of Islam, and the Nation of Islam now has become something of a space cult, in which the Nation of Islam was originally founded by W.D. Fard, who some people say he preached that the black race was God. Other people say they preached that he himself was God, come to redeem the black race. It then got altered so that you have a number of science fictional elements in it. For example, Louis Farrakhan claimed in the 1980s that he'd been taken aboard a spaceship from Venus and taken back to show that W.D. Fard and Elijah Muhammad and the rest of the great prophets of the cult were alive and well and directing the war against the whites. According to the Nation of Islam, thousands of years ago there was a black super civilization, but the evil Meccan scientist Yaqub wanted to destroy it, and so bred white people as these mutants in order to destroy the purity and achievements of the black race. I mean, it's not just white people, it's also other races as well, but it culminates with whites. Other black Islamic cults, like the Ansar Allah community, also hold the same attitude towards whites, that they're vicious demons plaguing black people. You then get on to the Black Hebrew Israelites, who again believe that blacks are the only true Jews, and have much the same attitudes towards white people. Rastafarianism, again, based around the veneration of the Ethiopian Emperor Haile Selassie, who was believed to be a promised black messiah who would take them back to Africa. Again, a protest movement in Jamaica against colonialism. And then you have the Nation of Yahweh, which I believe has now been reformed, but was viciously racist against whites. The Nation of Yahweh was a religion and also a business. Its leader, Yahweh Ben Yahweh, was given a prize, I believe, by Bill Clinton in the 90s for the way his businesses had regenerated rundown black areas. I mean, they ran grocery stores and hotels and all sorts. But Yahweh Ben Yahweh and 7 of his leading followers were... No, not 7. That's their victims. That's the number of their victims. And a number of his leading followers were then arrested, indicted and jailed by the FBI for the ritual murder of 7 white vagrants. In order to, they held too that white people were devils. And in order to prove your total allegiance to the religion and Yahweh Ben Yahweh, you had to murder a white man. Now, alongside of this, there is Afrocentrism, which started off in the 19th century as a movement designed to counter the wide attitudes of cultural superiority, and it was based around ancient Egypt. Ancient Egypt, in their eyes, was a black civilization, and as a civilization, it was responsible for the achievements, the foundation of white culture, which we had appropriated from them. And also, there's another side to it. They also believed that everything good in Africa was ultimately due to colonization by the ancient Egyptians as well. And that also causes problems. Now, from there, it has expanded so that everything done by the white, so that the original inhabitants of the British Isles were black, and Stonehenge was built by black people, as well as the original Chinese, Vietnamese, just about everybody. It also has a viciously racist anti-white side to it, in that white people are held to be colder, less spiritual, more cruel, and less sexual. And it's because we're less well endowed than black people that we hate them. I mean, this is taught by some of the Afrocentrists, and it really is quite bizarre. So, these are you have a range of pseudoscience coming out from it, so that you have people claiming that, well, the ancient Egyptians may have understood quantum mechanics at its most extreme. And when this started gaining real power in the 90s, a lot of people, also on the left, were worried about it being taught in American public schools, and also the number of private schools which were teaching what is basically racial pseudoscience. Now, I also have a problem with the way slavery is being taught in this country, or memorialised. Naturally, because of the lack of achievement and lack of professional and academic success compared to other groups of blacks, there's a lot of emphasis on slavery and a discussion of whether slavery is responsible for it. This is transatlantic slavery. What is forgotten is that slavery was universal. It was practiced in the ancient world by nearly all civilizations, right across the globe. It wasn't just white people. It was also you also get down to it was also, say, the great Mesopotamian civilizations in the Near East, like Assyria, Akkad, and so on, Babylon, and so on. You could find it in China, in India, certainly amongst the Arabs and Islam, and definitely in Africa. And there is a reluctance to talk about black African complicity in the slave trade. And no wonder, and no wonder, it's very delicate. But that needs to be talked about, and also white Europeans and Americans were themselves being enslaved by the Barbary pirates, who were they were pirates from North Africa, Muslim pirates from Morocco, Algiers, and Tunis in North Africa, who raided European shipping and the southern coast, and mostly the southern coast of Europe, for white slaves. Now, there is no commemoration of them, or little mention of them. There are many books on them, and these are excellent, but there isn't the same kind of public awareness. And I believe there should be, just so that we don't get to a situation where slavery is solely seen as something that white people do to people of colour. There are other issues in that there is little awareness of how other civilizations also manage to construct their own theories of racial superiority and racial attitudes of contempt towards other races. Like, around about the 7th century, the Chinese produced a theory that said that I think Europeans were descended from monkeys and criminals. I mean, obviously, this does not affect China now, but it was produced then. Now, Islam also produced had racial theories. They believed in the Middle Ages there was a theory that white people were white because they didn't have enough sun when they were gestating in the womb, and so they were literally undercooked. Black people were darker in colour because they had too much sun, and so they were overcooked. Well, brown people, the Arabs, just right, just the right level of sun. And they also produced theories to explain why the Arabs and the Muslim peoples were racially superior to both white Europeans and black Africans. But again, there has also been studies of the way the Chinese have also produced ideas of their own racial difference and distinctiveness compared to other people. So this is not understood either. So you have books like, I believe it looked like Abraham X. Kendi's anti-racist baby book, telling you that racism was invented by white people. Racism wasn't invented by white people. It's emerged at various times and in various places around the world by different ethnicities to justify their attitudes, their own attitudes of superiority to other ethnicities. Yes, it emerged in Europe, but it has also emerged in other places as well. But this is just ignored. It's not tackled. It's not recognised. I also include in the book some cases of lived experience, or people's experience of anti-white racism as they've experienced it. Sometimes it's a man going out with a black woman, and other black people have strongly objected to it, and they've been met with abuse. Sometimes more so. Again, this happened, or I assume this is correct. If we are sincere about tackling racism, then anti-white racism must also be tackled. It can't be ignored. I mean, one of the biggest scandals was over the Pakistani grooming gangs. Now these picked on white girls, and it was covered up for ages because people were too scared of pointing the finger and saying, yes, there is a racial dimension to this. It didn't fit the framework in which everything evil done racially is done by white people to people of colour. And because of that, there was a lack of will in tackling it, and it was covered up. And behind this, people have said, one of the Muslim councillors who was in Rotherham, who was instrumental in ending this abuse and getting it properly tackled, said she was a Muslim, and it came from the way from this strand in Muslim culture which looked down on white women for their sexual freedom. And also you find that there is a nasty word used by Asians for white people, Gora, which is a term of abuse. Now that also needs to be tackled. There have also been demands, and are demands, for racial and religious segregation. In the 1960s and 1970s, various black radical groups wanted autonomous black areas and black communities in America. I think we had a British politician, Paul Boateng, come out with this in about 1984 and 1985, as I recall, as it was then covered in The Observer. And I've also found in Muslim publications now there are arguments as demanding separate Muslim communities. Anjem Choudary, who was he was the head of Sharia for Belgium in the 1st of January 2000 issue of the Financial Times Colour Supplement. Choudary was there saying how he wanted a separate Muslim enclave in Belgium with Arabic as its spoken language under Sharia law. Now, you can't protest against apartheid and not tackle these ideologies. Another problem more recently has been what has been called pack attacks by black men against white people in America. And one of these, these have been tackled by black American conservatives. And these are racial attacks by a group of young black men who have beaten white people, sometimes girls, and racially abused them. And yet there is no coverage of this by the media, and the police aren't interested. Or if there is, the media does cover them, then it's excused. The attacks are supposed to be a response to the oppression these young men are experiencing in a racist America. And so we have had the weird, quite strange situation where you have a lot of black American conservatives actually defending white people from charges of racism. There have been black people protesting against the teaching of critical race theory in schools, saying they don't want it, it's divisive, they've got white friends, they've never experienced racism from them, and they don't want their children being taught that they can't achieve anything they want to be in America, the classic American dream. And I believe they have a point. So, while I don't deny black racism, I don't think it's the whole story. The whole story, this includes anti-white racism,